If you're part of the minority of Americans who are unhappy with this election result, then this could be the video for you. Even if you are part of the overwhelming majority who are very happy with the result, then this could also be a useful video because it's always a good idea to have a little plan B in your back pocket just in case things don't go the way that you thought they would, kind of like 2020 went. So this is about looking for somewhere that you can have as an emergency getaway destination, a bolt hole of a location for you. Where in the world is going to be suitable for what is most important for you? Now, for myself personally, I can only speak from my experience because I don't know you yet and I don't know what your top priorities are. But I'm going to guess if you're watching this channel, which is Exit West, where we explore the crisis the West is going through right now and look for opportunities outside of the West and other options for us to set up a base, then the top priority for me personally is to be outside of the woke ideology, outside of overspending and massive debt, outside of inflation, and outside of potential global conflicts that could ensnare me into conscription. So with those things in mind, I think it's useful to have a couple of different options available. Now, I'm based in Australia, so it's going to be a very different story for those in Europe or in North America. I'll try and keep it as broad and general as possible. In general, you want to focus on three key ideas here. The first one is cultural. I think this is probably more important than thinking about the climate and the cost of the location, because culturally, are you going to fit in there? Culturally, are foreigners welcome in that place? And this will help you to eliminate quite a few countries, because if culturally you stand out like a sore thumb, sometimes that's a good thing, because if foreigners are celebrated like minor celebrity status, that's a great thing. But if foreigners are resented, if it feels like they are taking advantage of the country in some way, shape, or form, then that's probably not going to be the best fit. So it will narrow down some of the countries that you're going to be looking at. As a result, I tend to feel like some of the best countries culturally, if you're from the West, will be in that southern cone of Latin America. Now, you would also say Australia and New Zealand, right? But my priority is to exit the Western civilization to have something that is more geopolitically neutral rather than the NATO and friends allies. The southern cone of Latin America, places like Paraguay, Uruguay, southern Brazil, Argentina, Chile. These are places that historically have played more of a neutral role in global conflicts. They have more of a European culture, and as a result, Westerners can feel more comfortable there. The only barrier to that really is the language, but Spanish is a reasonable language to learn if English is your primary language. These countries generally also have a bit of a farm culture, and that means that there is generally a surplus of food, or the food supply chain is more localized and more secure as a result. They also are energy independent, at least Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina, and parts of southern Brazil as well. So you could choose these countries as a good bolt hole. If you're in North America, then probably places in South America are definitely more convenient to access at short notice, because that is the key. Other places that could potentially be suitable would be Southeast Asia. Now, there are tumultuous places in Southeast Asia, but there's also places where foreigners are very welcomed. Thailand is one of them, Cambodia is another one, Malaysia, Singapore, if you are on the wealthier side of things. The future looks very bright for these countries. Now, something that's important for me is that if there is some sort of global pandemic, then I am not forced to wear a mask. I am not forced to inject myself with something experimental. I am not forced to do those things, and perhaps Asia may not be the best place for that, but I would recommend always getting into more of a rural setting or a place that has less population. It's always going to be more laid back and chill than the cities. So you got to kind of pick and choose and have a look at how these countries handled themselves in 2020, 2021, and what it was like to live in those places, because Australia looks idyllic most of the time. until you get to 2020, and then it just turns totalitarian very fast. So this makes it unsuitable for times of crisis because the population has already demonstrated its willingness to suppress and subjugate the fellow citizens and neighbors for whatever the current cause is, and that can be whipped up in an instant with fear. So if you're trying to escape a crisis, you want to go somewhere that is somewhat inoculated against the fear. And I think places that have gone through hardship are somewhat inoculated against that. Whereas Australia, we've had it very good for a long time. We had no immunization against fear. And so when there was a whole lot of fear whipped up, people were willing to do absolutely anything to feel safe, to feel protected, and they gave away every single one of their rights. So for me personally, Southeast Asia is a question mark in that regard. I would look to islands instead. Vanuatu, fantastic place. You could just kind of do what you want. It's absolutely beautiful there. I love it. However, the downside of the islands is that they can get cut off and isolated very easily. So if I was to base myself out of an island like Fiji, Vanuatu, Tonga, Solomon Islands, and then I would be looking to have my own property, to be growing my own food, to have some land with it, to have access to water, or at least access to the coast, because cyclones, which is what we call them in this part of the world, typhoons everywhere else, do come through quite regularly, and when they do, they have a tendency of absolutely wiping things out. The cost of food goes through the roof, and we're relying on just supplies being flown in, which is very irregular, or shipped in. And that was the same thing during the pandemic. It shut down a whole lot of supplies, everything, the costs went through the roof. But if you were somewhat self-sufficient, it was an idyllic, paradise-like lifestyle. So you could find an island somewhere like that that's close to you. It could be suitable as your emergency get out of jail card. Now you want to set up residency within these places. You ideally want to have a home there of some sort, or a place that you could very easily get a home. So it makes sense to start traveling to these places to figure this out, to be on the ground and think, well, is this somewhere that I could spend that time if everything was going wrong? And keep in mind that with all our best plans, things can still go to hell. I mean, keep in mind we can plan and prepare as much as possible, but you know what? Shit can still happen, and probably will still happen. It's kind of like the story of the guy who escaped in the 1930s from Germany, seeing the writing on the wall, moved to a little island in the Pacific, and then World War II still managed to find its way to him, with the Japanese, Americans, Aussies fighting it out in that theatre. So, you know, these things can still happen. I wouldn't worry about those things too much because it's simply out of your control. All we can do is focus on what is within our control and do that to the absolute best of our ability, and the rest is in God's hands. So with that in mind, I think I'll sign off on this video for today. And always remember that there are no perfect places out there, but I do believe that there could be somewhere that is perfectly suited for you. So let's go on an adventure to find it together. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, so I'll see you in a future video. Ciao guys.